Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is City Councilor at Large Michael Flaherty, the Chair of the Government Operations Committee, joined by my colleague, City Council President and lead sponsor, Andrea Campbell, also by my colleague, City Councilor Ed Flynn, District City Council from South Boston, Chinatown, South End, and Bay Village. We are here today to discuss Docket 0240 in order for a hearing to explore voting rights for immigrants with legal status and other inclusive practices. This matter was sponsored, as I mentioned, by City Council President Andrea Campbell, referred to the committee back on January 31st of 2018. This hearing is a discussion about the possibility of allowing immigrants with legal status to vote in municipal elections and to examine other inclusive practices. An immigrant with legal status refers to a number of populations, including legal permanent residents, visa holders, temporary protected status recipients, and deferred action for childhood arrival recipients. To reiterate, there's no proposed legislation on the table. This is in order to have a discussion. I'd like to note that this hearing is being recorded, but will be broadcast at a later date. Comcast Channel 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 1964, and streamlined on the Boston City Council TV. We've also been joined by my colleague, City Councilor Ayanna Presley, and my colleague, City Councilor Josh Zakem. And without further ado, I also have received letters from colleagues. City Councilor Anissa Rasabi-George sent a letter that she regrets that she's unable to attend today's hearing. She had made a previous commitment to host an event with children at the Mildred Haley Housing Development over in Jamaica Plain, and she hopes that the conversation, presentation, and testimony are productive. And she's interested in the conversation about voting rights, but will reserve a response till after reviewing the hearing notes from her staff and from watching the hearing in its entirety. And also, as a member who signed on to the order offered by Council President Campbell, she supports today's public dialogue about the important topic. We also received a letter from our colleague, City Councilor Tim McCarthy. It's with great disappointment that I'm not able to attend today's hearing regarding the right and privilege of voting in the United States. My family scheduled a reunion, and I'm currently not in the country. I respect the request that you read this letter into the record. Make certain that all councils receive a copy of the attached letter. As I've stated in the past and explained in detail through attached correspondence, voting is a right and a privilege for those who took the oath to be a citizen of these great United States. I am and will remain confident and steadfast opponent of this proposal. Sincerely, Tim McCarthy, and I'll make sure that my colleagues get a copy of that. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the lead sponsor, City Council President Andrea Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty, and thank you to my colleagues, including Councilor Rasabi-George and Councilor McCarthy, who couldn't be here. Today's hearing, as I've been telling folks, and apparently it's been very controversial, but today's hearing is a conversation. I got into this work of being a counselor to have an impact on the residents in my district and frankly on the lives of the folks who live in my district. And that includes Mattapan, Dorchester, a little bit of Jamaica Plain, and Rosendale. And for me, that impact means taking action to produce actual concrete results for these folks. So whether advocating for the Community Preservation Act to produce more housing, or funding for youth programs, or taking steps to actually put forth policies that will change the number of women or people of color in our public safety agencies, or working on local initiatives that could potentially change the way we deliver education, all of this is designed to have an impact on the residents in the city of Boston. And not merely an impact that people can feel, but opportunities that our residents can receive. While I do not have authority over federal immigration policies, and I recognize that, I think we do have the authority to do a few different things on the Boston City Council. And one is to host hearings and conversations about important issues, even some issues that may be deemed controversial. Also to pass legislation to change the lives of folks in the city of Boston and to have an impact on the lives of those who live here. As we continue to follow news out of Washington, we're constantly talking about that news right here in this chamber every Wednesday typically. Watching families being separated, children being torn from their parents, those who serve in our military being abruptly discharged without cause, rounding up certain immigrants and shipping them back to their countries, pulling in local agencies, including our school department, sometimes to be a part of this malicious plan. We have to ask ourselves, and I ask myself, what can we do about this? And given the demographics in this city and in my district in particular, immigration is an important issue right now, not only for the folks who are seeking citizenship or who are here legally, but also for citizens. I live in a neighborhood where some of my neighbors are either permanent legal residence or seeking citizenship or on a pathway to get citizenship. These folks are in fear and they're sometimes in distress. And I, along with many residents in my district, feel that we in this country are currently at a crossroads. I cannot keep going to rallies, marches, or sending resolutions to President Trump. I don't think he is reading them. And so for me, this hearing is an opportunity to do something more than just send letters, more than going to marches, and more than going to rallies. And the more is just that, to have a conversation about inclusive practices, which might be voting, I don't know, but inclusive practices that we can make available to our immigrants and to those who are here legally in the city of Boston. Those who have been paying taxes, who send their children to our schools, who run civic associations, who are maybe even on some of our boards and commissions, who are active in the city of Boston and have been either for years or decades. And so I think we owe them the opportunity to participate in a conversation like this. I think we owe them an opportunity to have this hearing, and so I'm happy to have it. I'm happy to have the conversation. I was born and raised in this city. My father was born and raised in Roxbury in 1933. This city has a rich history, as we know. We know that Irish, Jews, Italians came here before, seeking better opportunities not only for themselves but for their children. We know that many families are doing the same today, but we also know, based on what is happening out of Washington or coming out of Washington, that it's unpredictable. And the way in which you become a citizen is changing, and the process is changing. And people signed up to and went through a process to become a citizen, and all of a sudden they had to go through a new process. And sometimes that process changes every single day. And so this is an opportunity for us to say, we not only stand with you, but we're listening to you, and we want you to be a part of some of these conversations. And I have to give a little bit of credit to an individual who actually probably sparked this conversation within my office. We had a rally or a get-together right here in City Hall in the Piemonte room. And one of the folks who was leading the conversation, and the room was packed, by the way, but one of the folks who was leading the conversation said, "I'm sick and tired of our electeds showing up only for certain communities, particularly immigrant communities, in a reactionary response. They are often in crisis at different moments. So how can we be proactive in helping these communities feel strengthened, feel empowered?" I've received a lot of emails, as you can imagine, a lot of calls. And they've actually not all been negative. Some have also been positive. And talking about the value of citizenship, of course, and talking about what it means. And for some, they feel as though this may demean their citizenship. I like to think that there are some folks who view their citizenship differently. Some say being a citizen in the United States of America, that voting that's the number one thing, and they're happy about that. There are some who think traveling freely across the world is the best benefit that you get. And so this conversation today will extend not every possibility or every privilege or every responsibility, I should say, that is afforded a U.S. citizen to immigrants. We're only talking about the possibility of voting in local elections, not state or federal elections, and we're also talking about other ways to support these communities. And that may mean having a multilingual campaign that says you are welcome here. It may mean doing more for our students in BPS. It may mean having municipal ID cards. It may mean having moments where longtime residents connect with newcomers. It's a whole host of things, and I think the administration today will address those possibilities as well as some of our constituents. But today is a conversation that I'm looking forward to. And I'll add, for those folks who view voting as the number one thing and the best thing about being a U.S. citizen, I will tell you the numbers of those who turn on our elections aren't so great, so we got to do a better job. And so I don't know that all folks in this city view or equate being a U.S. citizen the same way. So today is a conversation. I look forward to having it. And as my colleagues know, I'm never afraid to have a conversation. So I want to thank my colleagues for being a part of this. And I also want to thank the administration as well in advance for their participation.
Thank you, Council President. We've also been joined by my colleague, City Council Lydia Edwards. Unless anyone has another opening statement, we have Chair at this time. In order of their arrival, Chair recognizes Councilor Ed Flynn.
Thank you to the Chair, Councilor Flaherty, for the opportunity to speak on this issue. Thank you, Council President Campbell, for your leadership as well. I'd like to say that my position is that I am opposed to a measure that would allow non-citizens to vote in our elections. I do feel the right to vote is a privilege reserved for U.S. citizens. I believe that the right to vote is a unique characteristic and privilege and reserved for those individuals who have gone through the extensive citizenship application process. However, I do not want to stifle discussion or other people's positions and opinions. I think the Boston City Council can and does serve as an example to demonstrate that we can have debates and discussions with decency and civility toward one another. I may have differing opinions, but we can show that we are able to treat each other with respect and dignity. Over the course of this year, as an elected official, I have stood here many times to highlight my family's respect and my respect for our immigrant communities and their enormous contributions to our city and our nation. I have talked about the Immigrant Gateway plaque outside City Hall dedicated by Mayor Flynn in 1991. Recently, I joined my colleagues to denounce the action at the border to separate children from families. Many times, I have supported efforts to make those to save TPS, or temporary protected status, for Haitian earthquake victims. I was also proud to be part of the U.S. relief efforts following the devastation of that country. We are proud that those seeking asylum from violence look to the United States as a beacon of hope in the world. I appreciate efforts to call attention to the contributions of our immigrant communities to the United States and to the City of Boston. I proudly served in the most diverse organization in the world, the United States military. I served in the Navy for 25 years alongside many immigrants on the Iraqi oil platforms throughout the Persian Gulf, Joint Task Force Guantanamo, at the Pentagon, and at bases throughout the United States. Immigrants served our nation bravely and honorably since the American Revolution. I've seen firsthand immigrants serving our country and putting others above themselves. In short, I've witnessed their bravery, determination, and love of America. I appreciate all of the enormous contributions made by immigrants to our country. I also feel that the right to cast your vote, as I mentioned, at the ballot box is something reserved for those who have obtained their citizenship. It is such a proud moment in their lives and a privilege they work so hard to earn. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Chair recognizes Councilor Ayanna Pressley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Councilor Andrea Campbell for your leadership in authoring this hearing order on this fundamental issue during this very timely. It is a timely discussion when we are at a crossroads. You are correct. This has stirred up a great deal of public opinion, and that has resulted in many calls and emails to all of our offices. Voting is one of the most important ways for our constituents to have their voices heard. It is a sacred right. And to Councilor Campbell's point, if my sourcing is correct here, and I look forward to hearing from our elections commissioner, but in the last mayoral election, despite the fact that we have some 418,000 registered voters, only 109,000 participated. That's 20%. So although this is a sacred right, many people are not exercising that right. So again, voting is one of the most important ways for our constituents to have their voices heard. The dialogue between constituents and representatives does not end on Election Day, but the vote is how we decide who our partners are. And it is the foundation of the highest ideals of this country. We all deserve a say in how we govern ourselves. And that is why I support the intent behind this hearing order. Our immigrant communities drive our economy, contribute to our tax base, contribute to the vibrancy of our communities. I believe they deserve a say in who represents them at the municipal level. While people at decision-making tables in the corridors of power are making decisions every day about their destinies, their livelihood, and their quality of life. Now, as a council body, we have stood in solidarity with Dreamers, TPS holders, and other immigrant groups that have been under attack from this White House and administration. And we should be considering proactively, with intention, every avenue to be a more inclusive city and to actualize the values that we espouse. I look forward to the testimony and will remain focused on ensuring today and beyond that every Bostonian feels they have a voice in their government.
Thank you, Councilor. The chair recognizes City Councilor Josh Zakim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo my colleagues' comments and looking back on the actions this body has taken, certainly in the 4.5 years I've been here, of standing with our immigrant neighbors and residents, whether it was on the Boston Trust Act, whether it was the recent resolution opposing President Trump's policies of separating families at the border, something that was such abhorrent behavior that even this president and this White House decided to stop doing it. I'm incredibly interested in looking at ways that this city government, and I look forward to hearing from our administration representatives, on addressing issues of providing documents in multiple languages, interpretation services at meetings to make sure that regardless of immigration status or ability to vote in municipal elections, that people do know what's going on in the city they live in and that are able to access important information, whether it's about the schools, whether it's about our police departments, our public works, our trash pickup schedules. I mean, these are all things that impact folks' everyday lives, and making sure it's available in the appropriate language, both in documents, online, and when people are calling in, is incredibly important. I look forward to hearing more from this, and I want to thank everyone for being here today.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair recognizes City Councilor Lydia Edwards.
I wanted to say thank you to the chair and to President Campbell for this, I think, very important conversation. I wanted to just get out ahead and say that this is, I hope this is not a question really about the importance of voting or really the importance or the contributions of many of our immigrant neighbors, family members here in Boston. I really hope that this is the conversation about civic participation and ensuring that in addition to not only native-born Americans, that we also make sure that our city is as broad and inclusive as possible to assuring that immigrants feel that they can civically participate. One of the ways is through voting, but there are many other ways. And I just wanted to also let folks know that there's many other forms of voting as well. Participatory budgeting is a form of direct voting on budgets that cities have implemented and allow people as young as 12 years old to vote on. This is a moment of, I think, creativity, not consternation. There does not need to be conflict right now in this conversation. I do not want to entertain any anti-immigrant voices in this conversation. This is not about what we aren't as a city. This is what we can be as a city. And what I have stated firmly already is that when it especially comes to the immigrants who may not have their citizenship yet, but are willing to die for the democracy that allows this process to happen, those serving in our U.S. military, those who are veterans, again, who are not yet U.S. citizens, I firmly think that if there's one thing that the city of Boston can give them, and that's an additional voice in local politics, I am perfectly fine with that. So I'm just saying that outright. I'm the daughter of a veteran. I grew up on military bases. I did not serve in Iraq, but while my friends' parents were there, we had therapy sessions at the Air Force bases to make sure that we were connected, and none of us cared or would have cared about the status of the person who was serving in the U.S. military. So I'm putting it out there. I'm being very honest about where I stand and where I come from. I am not yet moved on folks who are not in the military and not serving, but I do want to be very clear. If this is a conversation about civic participation for all, I'm very excited to have it.
Good, thank you. And we've also been joined by our colleague, City Councilor Kim Janey. Councilor Janey, I know you're coming in at this time. Any opening comment? Very good. You have the floor.
So just wanted to thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councilor Campbell, for introducing this important hearing order. As I think someone already mentioned, we've received a lot of input from residents of the city through email, through calls. Much of it has been very nasty and negative, and it's very disheartening that residents in the city of Boston don't want to even entertain a conversation. How can we call ourselves a democracy if we're not even willing to have a conversation about our democracy, if we're not willing to have a conversation about who can participate with voting and with elections? I think voting is probably one of the most important things that we can do. As residents of a city who cares about what happens, we have a city of immigrants, a large immigrant population. I'm very much interested in hearing what our panel has to say about this, and I have some questions. Mostly I'm here to listen, but I just wanted to put on the record how discouraging and disheartening it's been to hear the nastiness that we often talk about is down in D.C., and it's right here in our backyard. So anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor. And so welcome to the first panel. We're going to get right into a panel discussion. We have two panels, and we obviously have public testimony. So just ask folks to be cognizant of that we have a heavy agenda, and like to try to get in as much as possible. If people can be as brief as possible, that's always helpful. So joining us today is Chief Marty Martinez, Chief of Health and Human Services, joined by our Director, Alejandra St. Guillen, Mayor's Office of Immigration Advancement, and also Commissioner Dion Irish, who's the city's election commissioner. So welcome to you all, and you have the floor if you want to take the lead there, Chief.
Sure. So good afternoon, Chairman Flaherty and Councilor Campbell, and to all councilors. Thank you for inviting us to be here with you today. As the Chief of Health and Human Services, I want to be able to express appreciation to sort of have an opportunity to think about all the inclusive practices and the work that this city has done and the administration continues to do with your support to support our immigrants in our community. I think that we all know and understand that Boston is and always will be an immigrant community, and is a community that has worked hard to ensure that there are practices, services, and resources that support immigrants throughout city government, whether it's through public safety in the police department, whether it's through housing, affordable housing and development, whether it's through Health and Human Services in our school district. Making sure that immigrants are served, engaged, and connected is an important part of our work in city government, and a valuable part that I think we all hold true. As a Mexican-American myself, whose both sets of grandparents were born in Mexico and immigrated to this country, these issues are incredibly important to me personally, and I wouldn't be able to sit here with you today without the accomplishments of immigrants and what they've done for me personally, which is true for many of us here. And so as a member of the administration, I stand here to sort of share with you briefly some of those practices that we've come into play, and some of the commitment that we have as a city government. You know, Councilor Edwards mentioned one of the pieces that we wanted to briefly, I wanted to mention just a few examples of things that do engage immigrants, and one of that is participatory budgeting. We have that, and many of you may already be familiar with that. We have participatory budgeting through Youth Lead the Change, where young people, regardless of immigration status, are able to participate, where they have the power to spend $1 million of the city's budget, where they're actively engaged, they're connected, and are able to sort of steer resources to places that are most important. So again, an example where we are actively engaging the community to ensure that all people have a voice. There's other examples where we're already doing that work as an administration in addition to some of the other opportunities. And that has to do with ensuring that immigrants have access to housing and resources free of discrimination. So our Office of Fair Housing and Equity, for example, continues to work with and investigate any housing discrimination that happens in our community, especially when that comes in discrimination that has to do with national origin or immigration status. We work to defend our immigrant brothers and sisters to ensure they have access to housing and access to those resources. We have an array of programs within the Health and Human Services Cabinet, and most of that really valuable work is led by Alejandra and her team from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, and I'm going to let her share most of those pieces. But I want to prioritize the other services that we also have as well, whether it's the English as a Second Language courses that run at a multitude of our community centers to engage the immigrant population. We know learning English and mastering English is a huge step in being able to be engaged and being able to participate in any process. And so that's a huge commitment we've made through our BCYF and through our partners that we have through all of that programming. Our access to our variety of programs through our Health Commission, whether it's programs through recovery, whether it's programs through our Office of Recovery Services or our Office of Food Access, where we're delivering meal programs to youth all across the city. Again, all services accessible to people, regardless of immigration status, regardless regardless of documentation. We continue as an administration to be a city that prioritizes the needs of all residents, and we've done that and will continue to do that. Whether it's our Veteran Services offices that's working specifically with folks to ensure that everyone can access Chapter 115 benefits and that we can ensure that the services are accessible regardless of where people have come from or regardless of their status, of what they're able to ascertain or take advantage of. And in addition, what's been central to all this, and I'm keen on this, is ensuring that our offices are diverse, that we have access to language capacity, that we have documentation, documentation that both is translated, but that we have accessibility for meetings and resources and ensuring that there's a voice. I think one of the pieces I want to leave you with is that, we remain committed to ensuring that everyone has the ability to have their voices raised. And that seems to be what we're talking about in this particular scenario, that people have the ability to have access, engagement, and connection to our city government. The administration and Mayor Walsh remain committed to that. We, as members of the administration, are committed to ensuring that that access takes place and are eager to engage in this conversation with the council, listen and learn and understand where you all are with your efforts. But trust this, that regardless of where we are in this conversation, this administration continues to be a champion for immigrants in our community and will continue to make sure all of our services are accessible to everyone who lives in our city. And so I leave you with that at this point, and now I would ask Alejandra to share more with you about some of the specific work we're doing within our Office of Immigrant Advancement.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilors Campbell and Flaherty, for hosting this hearing and this discussion. I'm going to go over a little a highlight of the work that we did in FY18, a lot of which is continuing in FY19, and then give some background on non-citizen voting and in particular other ways that we can encourage civic participation among immigrants regardless of status. I recently had a budget hearing, so I went over all of this. So I don't want to get too much into details. I know we're short on time as well. And I will say, echo what Chief Martinez said in terms of access and opportunity and making sure that immigrants have a voice. And so much of what we've been doing over the past 18 months has been a lot of defense work, which is reflected in the work that we do, but we hope to, but we continue to take proactive measures to support our immigrant communities. So some of the work that we've done as part of our Immigrant Advancement Initiative includes the Municipal Leaders for Immigration and Immigrant Advancement Summit, which brought together local leaders. We helped create a fund for DACA renewals, because DACA residents would have to renew sooner than expected. Our Two Immigrants with Love public arts campaign. Our annual Citizenship Day, which we do every year in collaboration with Project Citizenship. And our most current one in September of last year, we had 375 applicants and 65 different countries represented and over $150,000 saved in application fees through our fee waiver program, and that's a big part of providing access to citizenship. We've had large-scale immigration clinics for our current TPS holders, knowing that they are at risk of losing their status starting January 2019. We are an active member of the Welcoming Communities Transatlantic Exchange, where we exchange ideas with our counterparts in Germany. Boston hosted the first ever Cities Taking Action convening, which is the best practices convening of all the MOIA offices across the country to come together and strategize on how we were going to work together to support our immigrant residents and also defend our immigrant residents against what was coming down the pipeline from the administration. Our immigration information corners are in every single Boston Public Library, plus three BCYF centers and 2 YMCAs, and that provides all information from citizenship to lawyer referrals to local nonprofits that help our citizens and English ESL classes. We're critical in establishing the Greater Boston Immigrant Legal Defense Fund as many of you know, the civil immigration proceedings are civil proceedings, and so there is no right to an attorney. And the difference between having an attorney and not have an attorney is astronomical. It's about 10 times. You have 10 times more chance of winning your case if you have an attorney than if you don't. So having an immigrant legal defense fund to help support people in deportation proceedings has been a huge part of what we've been doing. Our We Are Boston Gala, which raises funds for we've done the mini grant initiative, as well as raises funds for critical needs in the community, like English for New Bostonians, our pro bono advice clinics. We also, although not immigrants, took a part in the response and assistance for Puerto Rican evacuees, and have conducted, have reached about 1,000 people through our Know Your Rights activities and workshops. So that's a snapshot. In terms of just some background, some numbers for you as we engage in this conversation on who would be impacted. This information comes from the U.S. Census Bureau. So we have about 90,000 non-citizens who are 18 plus. Of those, 43% are legal permanent residents, about 38,000. 18,000 have student visas. 14,000 have H-1B visas, and then 21% have other immigration legal status or no status at all. 39% of the East Boston population of all ages are non-citizens. 34% of adult Hispanics and 40% of adult Asians in Boston are non-citizens. In terms of the historical background of non-citizen voting, between 1776 and 1926, 40 states allowed non-citizens to vote in elections at some point to varying degrees, local, state, even federal. I believe you're speaking with, you mentioned that someone would be calling in from Maryland. So Takoma Park, Maryland is an example that should be viewed when looking at this information. They passed a non-citizen voting ordinance for city elections in 1992. In Chicago, all K-12 public school parents can vote for local school council members, regardless of citizenship or immigration status. And in San Francisco, all residents can vote in school board elections, regardless of citizenship or immigration status. And we recognize that there are a lot of different ways to promote inclusivity and civic participation for non-citizens that go beyond voting. When things that we support as a city include the same-day voter registration, encouraging voter registration at every naturalization ceremony, which is something that our nonprofit partners are very good at, expanding early voting to local and state elections. And then in April of this year, the council passed and the mayor signed an ordinance to provide voter registration opportunities during routine city interactions. Some additional best practices for local civic inclusion of immigrant residents includes things that we're already doing, including public education for immigrants, so our Know Your Rights and Immigration 101 workshops. We provide technical assistance for orientation workshops for foreign trained professionals in collaboration with the African Bridge Network, and funding that we provide to English for New Bostonians for our ESOL for parents of K-12 students are also ways that we engage immigrants of all statuses. In Nashville, Tennessee, they have a My City Academy, which connects immigrants to local government agencies and functions through seven sessions that meet monthly. Toronto, Canada has a Newcomer Leadership Academy, which brings together leaders from 39 entities, the government, community-based sector, hospitals, and school boards to share information and take action on system-wide issues that affect newcomers and their successful settlement. They have an integration plan that promotes the inclusion of newcomer lens and development and implementation of city programs and policies, leverages city resources to enhance newcomer access to information and city services, and support greater newcomer participation in city processes. In Cupertino, California, there's a block leader program, and that was developed a block leader program that builds social cohesion among residents in the same geographic area, both long-term and newly arrived. In San Francisco, California, in 2010, after Asian immigrants who had settled in historically black neighborhoods had experienced assaults, they created the Community Ambassadors Program, where immigrant and African-American neighborhood residents employed by the city to ease tensions by modeling positive cross-cultural communication and collaboration. And another thing that we are wrapping up our feasibility study for the municipal ID program, which is the counselor mentioned, and the feasibility study will include 5 deliverables: a demand analysis, a program design baseline, technical security and privacy standards, implementation plan, and an evaluation plan. And the triage group who had been tasked with putting this together will be able to deliver all of those shortly. Lastly, and this has been mentioned a number of times, the access to language access, the ability for all residents to engage with their local officials and the administration is hugely important, and that's why we continue to be active in our language access and communications plan. And there's a citywide language and communications access strategic plan, and the beginning pilot phase is wrapping up, and the early implementation plan is about to begin, which includes a plan to make sure that limited English proficient residents are aware. And it's a way of facilitating communication and trust between immigrant residents and city officials. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Alejandra, and welcome back, Commissioner. Commissioner Dion Irish, anything to add to this?
Yeah, briefly, first, thank you, Chairman Flaherty and Council President Campbell, and to all the distinguished members of the City Councils. It gives me great pleasure to be here today, because being the leader of a department whose employees were all dedicated to administering democracy and ensuring that there's access to voting, it gives us pleasure to be a part of these conversations, especially one like this that seems to have attracted so much attention about voting. So I agree, Councilor Campbell, that I hope that this turns into more people who are actually currently eligible participating. As Councilor Presley mentioned earlier, there's room for growth there, lots of room for growth in terms of getting eligible voters to come out. And that, actually, that's really the focus of the election department. We're focused on operationalizing the policies that we're tasked to administer. And that is, so currently our focus is how do we make sure that all our eligible voters are participating, are registered, are up to date. And so we're happy that we're able to recently work with the City Council to increase voter access. We've already begun that work, to work with the Boston Public Schools to make sure that registrations are part of their welcome centers, that voter registration is a part of the welcome centers, that the Boston Public Libraries are also incorporating voter registration into their processes. And same goes for our Transportation Department when they're interacting with folks who are updating or applying for resident parking permits. So we're very happy to report that work is underway, and we're very happy about that. As Alejandra mentioned, we also work with a lot of the nonprofit groups who are doing registrations at naturalization ceremonies. And we also work with a lot of community organizations. Anyone that pretty much reaches out to us, we're either going to support them directly or indirectly with voter registration and voter access efforts. Currently, we're conducting community voter rights workshops in various communities. And, and our engagement doesn't stop there. We're also working with students through our Student Poll Worker Initiative to engage them, to get them to help out on election day, to be volunteers and hopefully participants in one way or the other, whether it be voting or in another capacity. So we take engagement to be a very important part of our work and an expanding part of our work. Now, as it relates to today's hearing, very much looking forward to hearing the rest of the testimony, particularly, as Alejandra mentioned, from Tacoma Park County in Maryland, who I know they actually have non-citizen voting. So we're interested to hear the rest of this testimony, and we'll leave it there for now.
Very good. Thank you very much, Commissioner. That will be part of the second panel, so hopefully we'll be able to stick around and we can get to folks from Takoma Park. So the lead sponsor is going to defer questions, my colleagues, in order of their arrival, if they have any questions of this panel before we go to her questions, and also the second panel on public testimony. Councilor Flynn, any questions at this time of this panel?
Yeah, thank you, Council Flaherty. I just want to encourage the election department to continue to reaching out to returning veterans that are now living in Boston, ensuring that they have access to voting. And if we can continue doing more outreach to our homeless veterans, giving them access to the ballot box as well, I think would be critical. I know top priority of Mayor Walsh is making sure that our homeless veterans have housing, and he's been a real leader on that throughout the country. And I just want to encourage you to continue that same efforts as it relates to election and voting as well.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Chair recognizes Council Presley. Any questions of this panel this time? Councilor Zakim, any questions of this panel this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all three of you for your efforts on outreach, civic engagement. I've had the opportunity to work with all of you on various aspects of this, and I just want to say, Commissioner Irish, it's great to hear that our act to make it easier to access voter registration is moving forward in implementation, and to hear that those opportunities are being presented to folks, and seeing the setup for voter registration out in City Hall Plaza as people come here is just another important aspect of that outreach. And I want to echo Councilor Flynn's comments that he has regularly brought up in these discussions, and I want to thank him for that, about making sure that folks who are either currently serving in the armed forces overseas, but who are Boston residents and eligible to vote, are able to participate. It's an ongoing issue, I think, particularly when folks are away for some time and come back and may find themselves on the inactive voter list because they didn't receive their city census form. And I don't want to get too off topic here, but I do think it's really important to see your dedication, the Walsh administration's dedication and support of making sure that eligible citizens are registered to vote and able to participate is incredibly encouraging. So I want to continue that, and thank you all for your work in this area.
Thank you, Councilor. Any questions of Councilor Lydia Edwards at this time? Chair recognizes Councilor Kim Janey. Any questions of this panel at this time?
A couple, if you don't mind. So first and foremost, thank you all for the amazing work that you do. Alejandra, you mentioned, I think, that 40 states have varying degrees of voting for non-citizens. Is that currently, or is that over?
No, that ended in 1926.
1926?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's hasn't been around for a while.
Okay.
So-
All right. In terms of current municipalities in the Commonwealth of Boston, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, anything happening?
Well, no, because there's, I think a couple towns have voted for non-citizen voted. I know that the
Amherst did, Cambridge
Amherst and
did,
Cambridge.
but it gets stuck at
the State House.
Yes.
The home rule petition,
Right.
yes.
So nothing in the Commonwealth?
No.
Okay. Is this a concept that you have thought about? Non-citizen voting? And if so, what would it look like? Have you thought about, if you've lived here in the city of Boston for 5 years, or, in this country for 10 years, or have any of you given any of this any thought?
Yes, if I could, I think from our perspective, I think, the details and any proposal that would come from the council, obviously we would want to look at, and the mayor would want to look at to better understand it. I think we're so focused really on that engagement and that, access to services and resources, and that really is the lane that we're focused in. But generally, we would want to see any proposal and would consider it and be really interested in learning more about where you all land on the issue.
Well, so thank you. As I said earlier, it's just disheartening to see the anti-immigrant sentiment right here in our city. I appreciate the work that you're doing to engage all residents, but particularly our immigrant community. So thank you for the work that you're doing, Alejandra. I think as a country, as a city, we should be trying to expand opportunities. Generally speaking, I don't know where folks are going to land on this. I'm interested in hearing more and just understanding more of what's out there, what has worked in other places. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilor Ayanna Presley.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and thank each one of you for your personal as well as your professional dedication and commitment on these issues to strengthen our democracy and to be more inclusive. Since we brought up veterans, I don't want to go too off topic, but since we do have the platform and the opportunity, I just wanted to better educate myself in thinking about another population of returning citizens, and that is formerly incarcerated individuals. As much as, I would like for our correctional facilities to provide on-site voting, and there are correctional facilities throughout the country that do this. One of the ways that we are more progressive than many other states is that formerly incarcerated individuals can vote here once they are re-entering into society. And I was just wondering, I find there's a lot of misinformation about that this is here in the Commonwealth, that formerly incarcerated individuals can cast a ballot, that they do have the right to vote. So just wanted to better understand from an education and outreach standpoint what we're doing, and when people are released, are they being provided with the voter registration form or anything like that?
Yes, so my civic engagement coordinator has been doing work with our Office of Returning Citizens
Great.
regarding that, so they are getting voter registration information upon return. And I also wanted to just mention that in terms of our military serving overseas and overall our Uokawa voters, as of tomorrow, we expect that we'll be able to begin sending off ballots for the September 4th election. So I just wanted to share that with you as well.
All right, great. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Council President Andrea Campbell.
I'll keep this short just to get to the second panel, and if you guys could stay, feel free to stay over here. But if you have to, one of you have to leave, I understand. But thank you for your testimony, and thank you for all that you guys do. I know it's not easy work, particularly the increase in folks coming to you guys, whether it's not just some of the policies in DC, but even some of the weather and hurricanes and other countries is obviously putting a burden on the city and your offices in particular. So thank you for the work you do. I just have a couple of questions. So it was mentioned earlier, and I was going to bring this up, participatory budgeting, other ways that are direct opportunities for folks in the city of Boston to weigh in on a policy, to weigh in on a budget discussion or something else. Can we speak to what the direct participation looks like outside of participatory budgeting? And then the second question is, and we'll hear from folks specifically on the voting piece. But before there's even a proposal, has there been discussions internally or externally with folks in the community about this? Given the office that you sit in, I already know, even folks who couldn't attend today because of the hour of the hearing, people said, we've been talking about this for a while. It's great that there's finally a conversation on it. So I'd be curious what you guys are hearing when folks are talking about this in terms of a possibility.
In terms of the non-citizen voting being a
Right, and
possibility.
then specifically direct participation in our processes and decision-making.
What are those? Okay. In terms of the non-citizen voting, we're very thankful that we're having this hearing and starting this conversation. I think one thing that I noted before, but is particularly true, is that the past 18 months have been very much a defensive mode operation. And so we appreciate these opportunities to be proactive and to think about how we're pushing civic engagement forward in whatever form that they take. There hasn't been a whole lot of discussion that I know of. I know that there are people here who are going to testify on both sides, and I think that one thing that definitely comes to the forefront is just how anything works within this new climate that we live in with the federal administration, and just being very cognizant of that, of being that reality. In terms of people participating in the budgetary process other than participatory budgeting, I don't know, Chief Martinez, if you want to take that one.
Sure. I mean, the piece that I would add is that, and as everyone here knows, because you have them in the community all the time, there are a variety of community meetings that ONS, our Office of Neighborhood Services, does an active engagement and outreach deep into the community to engage people, whether it's a development, whether it's getting folks engaged in a community process, whether it's trying to ensure folks can have access to information, regardless of whatever those pieces are. There's a strategy through our neighborhood services to sort of do that work. And again, that's regardless of immigration status, that's regardless of neighborhood, but the value really being how do you reach deep into the community to sort of get people involved in those processes. So I think that that's, you know, how do we engage more people is always the question, and I think the city works hard to do that. Specifically, I think we could better understand, and maybe this conversation is a part of it, are there ways we can do it better? And are there ways we can reach deeper into the immigrant community to ensure that they have a voice in certain processes? And I'm gonna give you one example. That Youth Lead the Change, for example, that I mentioned that's run through the Department of Youth Employment and Engagement, they actively this past year worked to ensure they had a more diverse group of young people, that they had more diverse neighborhoods, that they had more young people with diverse backgrounds, and they did that really literally with shoe leather, going around and engaging students in different schools and in different neighborhoods to ensure that they had more folks involved, whether through the Mayor's Youth Council or whether it was actively through this process. So it has to be deliberate, and that's part of what they did in this work. I would suggest that we could probably learn other strategies that we could take on to ensure that there's other ways to actively engage folks through this, decision-making processes. So I'll leave it with that.
Just for the sake of time, and in order to get to the next panel, I mean, I think we have to, the civic participation, of course, there's meetings, there's civic associations, and we go to quite a few, and are intentional about pulling folks in the community regardless of their status, because they live there, to be a part of development conversations, licensing, an ordinance that may be filed or not, just to show up in some way, something on housing, the Community Preservation Act. But those are informal, right? They're not formalistic powers that connect them in such a meaningful way when it comes to decision-making here in this chamber. Participatory budgeting, I think, is a great example. But I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think we need to take it, I would like to see us take it a little bit further in talking about what does intentional participation look like, where it has some value and some weight in the decision we make in this chamber and in this building. And I think when people are talking about voting or something else, that's what they're referring to. And I think we've talked earlier about folks serving in the military, and that's been coming up quite a bit, in particular in this context because of what's been happening of late. And I think that's another reason why we should give this serious consideration if we ask folks to go and serve in a war and die. At a minimum, we should be asking them, asking ourselves, what would it mean for them to participate at this level? And we're not talking about, and I want to make this clear, state and federal elections. And someone will talk about that, the risk of folks doing that and jeopardizing their applications to become citizens. We don't want that to happen. But at this level, where they live, where they run businesses, where they come back to after they serve in the military, I think at a minimum we should be thinking a little bit deeper and more intentional about this particular proposal. And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. I think people also deserve to know that too. So thank you, guys.
Very good. So thank you. That will conclude panel one. You're welcome to sit over here if you choose, or if Senator Representative who wants to stay back. And then with respect to the second panel, Jeff Gross, Policy Consultant, World Educational Services, Global Talent Bridge, if you could come right down here and take that first seat. Caroline Cerrado, Caroline's the Legislative Director for State Representative Byron Rushing. We're also joined by phone Jesse Carpenter. Can you hear us, Jesse? Jesse's is the clerk at the clerk's office at the City of Tacoma Park in Maryland, where they have this. George Pillsbury of Nonprofit Vote, if George can make his way down, as well as Veronica Cerrado. Veronica Cerrado, Executive Director of Project Citizenship. So if you'd be kind enough to take these 4 seats. And we have Jesse Carpenter is joining us by phone. Jesse, you can hear us clearly, correct?
Yes, I can.
Very good.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
And we're going to start off with Jeff Gross, Policy Consultant, World Educational Services, Global Talent Bridge. If you can introduce yourself for the record, and you have the floor, and give us your thoughts.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So thanks very much to the previous panel, and also to Council President Campbell and Councillor Flaherty for sponsoring this meeting. I'm just a few words about my own background. My name's Jeff Gross. Until last March, I was director of the New Americans Integration Institute at the MIRA Coalition, the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. The goal of that institute, which I led for 4 years, is to pursue research, policy advocacy, and program partnerships that promote the economic, linguistic, social, and civic integration of immigrants and refugees in the U.S. I'll say it was actually a particular privilege at that point as a native-born white American to be working in that role and work with so many immigrant community members, community leaders as part of that efforts. I also want to say that the remarks I have today are my own. They're not in any way or, a reflection of MIRA Coalition's position today. So just in the interest of time, as I said, I'm going to read some prepared remarks. So just to talk about what we meant by immigrant integration. Immigrant integration, in the sense we used, is often described as a two-way process, something that strengthens the policies and systems that allow immigrants to participate fully in the families, work, and communities they live in, and also in turn something that benefits all Americans by helping immigrants contribute to the communities in which they live. Immigrant integration also means valuing what newcomers bring with them, as well as emphasizing what's needed to ensure their success here and their contributions to the larger community. And that's something that's true of the welcome that immigrants have received in Boston for the most part, and certainly from the city. So what I'm going to talk about here is really what the city, from my perspective and the work I've done, what the city and community-based partners can do to foster immigrant civic engagement and inclusion, both with respect to non-citizen voting, in the context of non-citizen voting, and more broadly. So by what I mean more broadly means not only the issue of voting, but having immigrants play a more engaged, knowledgeable, and effective role in shaping the institutions that affect their lives and really all of our lives living in this city. This includes not just elections for local government, but more mundane and day-to-day forms of civic engagement, participating in PTAs, neighborhood associations, faith communities, chambers of commerce, unions, local planning meetings, which we've heard about, or community organizing, and the many other institutions and processes that make up the civic space, and that lead to higher levels of civic engagement overall, including voting. So I'm briefly going to try to frame what's actually a fairly wide-ranging issue, and then suggest a few concrete approaches the city and community partners can pursue to support immigrant civic engagement and inclusion in this larger sense. So most of the work around civic integration actually focuses on economic, social, and the linguistic part of the integration equation, not so much civic engagement. That's not surprising, maybe, since enhancing civic participation is in many ways a much more complex issue, and it's not something there's a lot of public funding for. So it's really the programmatic and policy solutions that get the attention, sort of what, as Chief Martinez was actually enumerating, education, workforce and economic development, social services, family and children, access to housing, legal services, that sort of thing. So it's really much of what states and cities like Boston and community-based groups are already working on to support immigrant inclusion, and often quite well. And in fact, doing this work well is really critical to strengthening stronger immigrant civic participation. Unless people have some personal and economic stability in their lives and have some comfort with the systems within which they operate, civic and political engagement will literally be something they can't afford. The city, along with many immigrant training and service organizations, including MIRA, offer citizenship assistance, something that's obviously key to civic participation and civic power on the most basic level, the power to vote. Organizations like MIRA, as well as the city and many partners, also work to register new voters and get out the vote and make sure naturalized immigrants use this power. And government bodies like the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and the Office of Neighborhood Services play a crucial role in making sure that the voices of individual immigrants and immigrant communities are heard and understood by the city, and that the needs and interests of the immigrants who make up 28% of residents of the city of Boston are taken into account in terms of how Boston city government works. So immigrant civic engagement, while it sits on a foundation of strong social and economic inclusion, is also a key factor in promoting these benefits. This is not just in terms of helping shape employment or housing policies, but on a very personal level. The people that immigrants, like most of us, meet and work with in civic settings, become part of the networks that help them navigate public and private systems, get better jobs, find new houses, find good schools for their kids. Arguably, proactive civic engagement in this form is actually much more important for immigrants than it is for the native-born, since immigrants largely don't have the benefit of growing up here, of having well-established personal networks and social capital, or having the luxury to take for granted that civic and political institutions understand and take account of their needs. So all of this said, what are some things that the city, either alone or really, from my point of view, working with community partners, can do to strengthen immigrant civic participation at these and other levels? How can we help make sure that new Bostonians truly feel part of and more politically and civically active in a city where they already have such a big role? A lot's already happening, as we've heard, but there's more to do, which is really why we're here. And here are just 4 of many possible directions that I wanted to propose. First, language access, and we've already heard a lot about this. Probably there's nothing more urgent in creating an atmosphere that fosters immigrant civic engagement than quickly and comprehensively implementing policies like the Communication Access Ordinance, which the Council supported and the Mayor signed into law in 2016. This policy makes sure there are coordinated and accountable language access services in all city departments overseen by a language access coordinator. I was very glad to hear from Ms. Sangayen how that this is moving into its second phase. This kind of process can also serve as a starting point for city departments to collaborate more effectively around a wide range of other access and equity issues. Human and financial resources are obviously a challenge here, but there are models from other locales that can help. New York City, for example, has an NYC certified program that tests and trains bilingual employees in providing interpretation and translation. Montgomery County, Maryland, prioritizes hiring and has a pay differential for bilingual employees. So such policies also encourage broader immigrant civic engagement by highlighting the value that immigrants' skills, the skills they bring with them, can serve both city government and their own communities. So second, leadership development. Boston is a city with many strong and effective immigrant leaders, from city government to community-based groups to faith organizations. But targeted leadership development and training efforts for immigrant community members, including immigrant youth, are needed to sustain and strengthen that leadership, especially in a time of change and many challenges for the community. In Philadelphia, for example, the Immigrant Leadership Institute at the Welcoming Center for New Pennsylvanians teaches participants, both current and aspiring community leaders, about grassroots leadership, mapping strengths and gaps, understanding existing policies, building networks, and engaging with local and state government. At an earlier historical tipping point in Boston, the Immigrant and Refugee Leadership Development Initiative was active from 2000 to 2006. The initiative had the support of the Hyams, Boston, and State Street Foundations and worked with both existing organizational leaders and immigrant constituencies. It's time to figure out how to renew such efforts. So third, integrate a civic participation component into Know Your Rights trainings and other immigrant education initiatives. The city, as we've heard, community-based groups, faith organizations, and many others have stepped up to help meet the growing need to inform immigrant community members of their rights in case of interactions with law enforcement and with ICE. Knowing your rights for defensive purposes can also be a first step to wielding rights and opportunities for proactive civil engagement and civic action. In the current environment, fear and expectations of bias are among the biggest barriers to immigrants, documented and undocumented, in participating in any civic activities, whether it's going to a PTA meeting or entering the voting booth. Grassroots groups have long combined training and support for immigrant civic empowerment with training on immigrant civil rights. And immigrant integration coalitions in locales as different as California and Idaho are showing how naturalization training or English language education can also be sites for robust training and practice in civic engagement, from get out the vote efforts to lobbying legislators. Fourth, And finally, it's important to build civic engagement across communities and across movements in this very diverse city. Immigrant communities are not the only ones that suffer from disenfranchisement and low levels of civic participation. Many common issues and interests align immigrant communities and communities of color in this respect, even as political rhetoric sometimes divides them. The issue of collectively building civic engagement across communities is a far bigger one than I could ever begin to frame here, but I wanted to close by pointing to the recent success of a statewide organization like the Massachusetts Community Action Network, or MCAN, in helping pass state minimum wage and family leave legislation and criminal justice reform in the past session. MCAN is a partnership of 5 interfaith coalitions across the state, coalitions that bring together faith, labor, and other groups to organize Black, immigrant, and white U.S.-born constituencies. Their collective grassroots engagement and action helped get these issues on the ballot, and MCAN community leaders worked closely with legislators and other interest groups to craft the final compromise. There is a model here worth looking at for the city, its community-based partners, and activists in all effective communities. So these, as I said, are just a few of the many possible directions that the city and partners can work on to support Boston's immigrants in becoming civically engaged residents and citizens. And by that, I want to stress that I mean the word citizens in its original sense, which is simply people who make a particular city their home. So I hope the city can consider these and related initiatives in the near future, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. And we're also joined by Caroline Cerrado. Caroline, Legislative Director for State Representative Byron Rushing. You have the floor to give your thoughts.
Hi, thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Caroline Cerrado. I'm the Legislative Director for State Representative Byron Rushing. He has filed legislation, currently H388, to give authorities to cities and towns to allow legal residents to vote in local elections. He would be here himself today, but the House is currently in formal session, so he's a few blocks away voting. But thank you so much for having this conversation. He's very appreciative and supportive of the conversation you're having today. In recent years, the legislature has received home rule petitions from 5 cities or towns requesting the right to allow legal permanent residents to vote in local elections. Those towns are Amherst, Brookline, Cambridge, Newton, and Wayland. None of these petitions have successfully passed the legislature. Representative Rushing has filed his legislation so that a home rule petition would not be necessary. The legislation would require the local legislative body to initiate the policy allowing non-citizens to vote, and it would then have to be adopted by voter referendum, so there will always be a chance for deep public input and voter consent. Opponents often imply that this legislation is unconstitutional. However, it is not prohibited by either the federal or state constitution. In fact, until the 1920s, it was common for non-citizens to vote. I'm sure our friend who we have on the phone from Maryland, where I believe 9 communities currently allow for non-citizen voting, will be able to speak more on this point. Immigrant families constitute a large portion of working families in the Commonwealth. They are a part of our communities, pay local property taxes, and send their children to local schools. Yet without voting rights, they have no voice in local public policy making. While our office will concede that this legislation is unlikely to pass the legislature this year, as there are only 3 remaining weeks in the legislative session, the City of Boston endorsing this legislation or passing their own home rule petition would help build momentum. Boston has a strong legislative delegation, and sending this message to the delegation would be a major part of creating widespread support in the legislature. Opponents of this legislation use a common tactic. They lump legal and non-legal immigration together and link crime to immigration. I believe this legislation sends an important message that we see immigrants are important bedrocks to our community and we welcome them in Massachusetts. Thank you so much for having me here today. Unfortunately, I need to leave and finish up some work, but I'd be happy to answer any questions from either the councilors or the public if you just contact our office, Representative Byron Rushing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And now we're joined by Jesse Carpenter, who's the clerk at the office of the City of Tacoma Park in Maryland. Jesse, you can hear us clearly, and you have the floor. If you can just introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Caroline.
Yes, I can. I'm Jesse Carpenter, City Clerk for the City of Tacoma Park in Maryland. I'm here not so much to talk about advocacy, but how non-citizen voting works in Tacoma Park. Just to give you a sense about the city, Tacoma Park is a diverse community. It's a city of around 18,000, located just outside of the District of Columbia in Montgomery County, Maryland. We have elections every 2 years for a mayor who's elected at large and 6 city council members. they're elected by ward. All serve concurrent 2-year terms, and our elections are nonpartisan. The County Board of Elections manages school board, county, state, and federal elections. We administer our own elections for mayor and city council. So, as said earlier, the City Council adopted non-citizen voting in 1992, and the first election where non-citizens were able to vote was 93. At present, there are around 300 non-citizen registered voters in the city, but our total voting population is around 11,500. So it's a small, relatively very small number. Non-citizens who wish to vote in city elections register with my office. At the time of registration or when they first vote, they provide proof of identification and proof of residence in the city. Once registered, the voter's registration is maintained as long as the voter continues to reside in the city and has not become registered with the state as a U.S. citizen. So my office receives the voter registration forms and maintains the supplemental list of Takoma Park-only voters. In preparation for a city election, the supplemental list is combined with the list of voters that we receive from the state of Maryland. When voters check in to vote, there's no apparent difference between voters who are U.S. citizens and voters who are not citizens. And we work very hard to make the process seamless for our voters, so there is no difference. So I wanted to keep my remarks brief. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Sure. Jesse, do they have to show identification to show that they're from Takoma Park, or how does that work?
Yeah, right. So they show identification to show who they are, and then something that shows that they are residents of the city of Takoma Park. So just as oftentimes it's a driver's license or a state of Maryland ID, but if they don't have that, we'll take other forms of identification. And proof of residence can be as simple as, if there's nothing else available, a utility bill received within the last 3 months at an address with their name on it. So we can be somewhat flexible in terms of accepting that proof of residence and identity.
And what's the percentage of voter in the average municipal election? Is it mayor and council? Are they every 2 years? Are they 4 years? Are they?
Every 2 years.
And what's the participation?
For all voters?
Yes.
Or for all voters, it ranges from as low as 10% up to a high of maybe 25%. So it varies depending on contested races. It makes a huge difference.
And what were the percentages pre-1992?
Oh, similar. I want to say that non-citizen voting has not had a huge impact on voter turnout here. I mean, I think it's more about inclusion and not so much about increasing turnout.
Gotcha. My colleagues, any questions of?
Yes. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us and staying on the call. Really appreciate it. Just some questions about what you're doing. First, how did this even come about? I'm just curious what the context was, what the conversations were in the community before this actually happened.
Well, sure. So Takoma Park happened to be an area where, when in the 80s, when there were the wars in Central America, many Salvadorans ended up in this part of Maryland. And that Takoma Park became a sanctuary city at that time in the 80s. And this, in a way, grew out of the combination of some voter reforms that the city was making, but also an attempt to be more inclusive of that large immigrant community. So it was controversial. It didn't pass unanimously. There was an advisory referendum, and the vote was close. And there was also an attempt by the state legislature to overturn our ability to have non-citizen voting, but that didn't make it out of committee. So there, since that time, I would want to say it's not very controversial anymore. Once in a while, things flare up, and we start to hear from people who are really upset that we do this. But generally, in a way, we're fortunate that we started this so long ago, I think, that it's just routine for us now.
Just some more logistical questions. How long does someone have to be a resident in Tacoma?
Well, 21 days, and that's for a citizen or a non-citizen.
And how do you define non-citizen?
Okay, so we define it as someone who is not a U.S. citizen. So as a sanctuary city, we don't ask for immigration status information.
So do you make a distinction between a person who is undocumented and a person with some form of legal status?
No, there would be no distinction.
And just, and I can come back around, Jesse, but obviously folks cannot vote in federal elections.
No, right.
So how do you manage those risks? What's the outreach to folks to ensure that they know they can only vote in local elections? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. What works mostly in our favor is that our elections are completely separate from state and federal elections. So with that, there's less opportunity for confusion. But we also provide information to let folks know, to make sure that they know that they could have adverse immigration consequences if they were to vote in a state, to vote in a state or federal election. And I have to say, in all these years, I am not aware of it ever happening or anyone by accident or on purpose of that ever happening.
Do folks still seek to become citizens?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it's quite common for me to have to prepare a letter for someone who has voted and responded to that question on the form that they fill out. So I write a letter for them explaining that they were permitted to vote in our local elections.
And then just one more question, and I hope you can stick around because we also have more folks on the panel, but just one more question. So one of the things that people have been saying, and I'm sure you had to respond to at some point, or two things, is this idea of diminishing the value of what it means to be a citizen. So I'm curious if you had to address that and what folks talked about during this conversation while this was sort of happening.
I want to say that, so they cannot vote in state or federal elections, but they are certainly citizens of the city of Takoma Park. And it doesn't diminish the vote of U.S. citizens. It's a right that they've been granted as residents of the city of Takoma Park.
And lastly, I'll just add, and maybe you can address this too, another concern is that obviously someone can move in, become a resident in 21 days. They don't really have an attachment to the community. And then I'm just referencing some concerns that came to me as a counselor, and I'm sure some others. They don't really have an attachment. They haven't been there for a long period of time. So were there conversations around 21 days or requiring that someone live there longer or not? How did you address that?
Well, so if you're a U.S. citizen who moved into Takoma Park from Boston, you only have to live here for 21 days and you can vote. So it's no different.
Can a non-U.S. citizen run for office in Takoma Park?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Learn something new every day.
It has not happened.
Okay.
Excuse me?
It hasn't happened, so.
Okay.
But they're eligible.
Yes, but they would be eligible.
And then just following up on the 21-day piece, the question really came out of this idea of someone, say, coming from Canada, moving into Tacoma, voting in your election, and then leaving Tacoma to go somewhere else. So this idea of influencing your election by not really being committed not only to Tacoma, but to this country.
Well, I don't see that as an issue. I mean, why would someone do that? It hasn't been a problem.
So, I hear you, but that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Any questions of our colleagues?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
There it
Chairman.
is, Councilor Anna Presley. Stay with us here for a second, Jess.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
And we can repeat some of those too, Councilor.
Okay, all right. Thank you for your participation. So I just had a question about, on the implementation side of things, and I'm sorry if I missed it in your presentation. Could you speak to me or share with us what your staffing levels are and what your operating budget is?
Well, as I said, we're a small city, 18,000 people. The elections are run out of the city clerk's office, and we have 2 full-time employees, and around election time also at least 1 part-time employee. And we have a board of elections that fully participates around planning and conducting the election. And our elections are inexpensive. We're $10,000 to $15,000 is what we pay to run the
Look at our
elections, not
commissioner.
including staff time.
You hear that, Dion?
A little envy, a little municipal envy over here. Okay, you said $10,000 to $15,000. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
And-
but I have to say, we're doing paper ballots and a hand count in Takoma Park. So we had in our last election 2,500 voters. So it's manageable at this point. We hope, frankly, in 2020, we're going to be changing to even year elections, and we will be side by side with the county at each precinct in the city. And I think at that point, the hand count, we won't be able to do anymore because I expect we'll double or triple our voter turnout at that point.
And do you have a specific line item in your budget that is dedicated to education or outreach specifically?
No, not specifically. And frankly, I have to say, we don't do enough of it. It's a challenge.
Okay.
The outreach and civic engagement. It's important and it's a challenge to do as much as we need to.
All right, appreciate your candor there. My final question, since you already spoke to what my question would have been in terms of jeopardizing or compromising anyone's application or pathway to citizenship by them accidentally participating in a federal election. You unpacked that for us. And again, I apologize if I missed it in your presentation, but could you talk about what protections there are for non-citizens voting to ensure that information is not being shared?
Well, so in terms of running our election, the information can be shared because it's a list of voters. It's not a list of non-citizens. It's certainly not a list of undocumented residents. It's a list of registered voters in the city.
All right,
And
so
we
they're not
combine-
coded differently or anything?
Pardon?
They're not coded differently? Undocumented
Well,
non-citizens in your roles or
our
data?
election is completely separate from state and federal elections, so that it's completely separate. So we don't have the challenge of you coming in, checking in, and getting the wrong ballot. It doesn't work that way here. So we're running our own elections, but we do use of course, the voter list from the state, and we combine that with our list of non-citizen voters and conduct our election.
But how do you guard against the threat of that data being shared, making a non-citizen vulnerable? Just in this climate, we spoke earlier.
Absolutely. It is something that we're concerned about, but in terms of running an election, the information can't, it's name and address and date of birth is what you have. It's not name and address and country of origin or name and address and status. So,
Okay.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Some sort of alarm going off.
Right. All right, well, thank you for hanging in there with us.
It's really, they're residents of the city of Tacoma Park, and there's nothing that identifies anything special about them.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Just to Tacoma Park, do they allow people to vote for deceased people like they do here in Boston?
Not here, not in Tacoma Park.
Very good. It's an Irish trick up here.
Yeah.
Chair recognizes City Councilor Kim Janey.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of questions, and you may have covered this already, so I apologize if it's a repeat. Has there been an increase in voter participation?
Not as a result of this, no. We work hard to, just as I'm sure your election department does, we work hard to get people to come out and vote, but it's hard to get people interested in these local elections.
So you have not seen an increase. Also, could you speak to the country of origin for most of the non-citizens in your town?
Well, so it varies. We have a lot of African immigrants here, recent African immigrants. And then we also have, I want to say, because we're right outside Washington, D.C., we have a lot of people who are here as a result of being here because of where we're located. And so they might also be living here, but they're not U.S. citizens.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jesse. You're welcome to stay with us here. We're going to go to George Pillsbury, the nonprofit vote. Welcome, George. Good to see you.
Well, thank you, Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Campbell. I'm really pleased to be here and be part of this conversation. I'm George Pillsbury again. I'm a founder of Mass Vote and its national partner nonprofit vote. Full disclosure here, Kim Janey is a founding board member of Mass Vote, so she knows a lot about my background. We provide nonpartisan voter engagement training and resources to nonprofits and community groups in Boston and all 50 states. We manage National Voter Registration Day, which is on the 4th Tuesday of September, and we do that in coordination with Secretary of States across the country and local election offices. You know, we don't have a position on this issue, but we do a lot of policy work, especially policies related to youth and new voters, helping them vote, become active participants in our democracy. You know, all the way from voter registration to voting methods. There's certainly a lot of ideas out there. This one, resident voting, is really attracting a lot more interest. We're seeing that sort of bubble up as something around the country that people are definitely exploring. You know, without duplicating, I want to add a couple more ideas here, and one on the subject of, you know, how this proposal might compare to other reforms out there, more generally, and then some strategies to consider in moving a policy like this forward. I think that's really important to, you know, in this environment and any environment, to be careful about how we, you know, how this, you know, how you educate the public about this issue. Now, we analyze election reforms through three lenses. Is the policy well-grounded, and is popular or potentially popular? You know, we're not interested in policies that don't really make sense from day one. Well, the rationale has been addressed, and I think in other forms. I'm not going to get into that. I think it's contested, but certainly there's a rationale for it. In cities that have non-resident legal non-resident voting, you know, or close to adopting it, with some education, is shown to gain some real popular support. I mean, I want to reach across the border on this one because, you know, the city of Vancouver just passed it a couple months ago, and there's some polling on that. Vancouver certainly is not Boston. It's Vancouver, Canada, you know, another country. But, you know, in many ways, it's more similar to Boston than a lot of other towns and cities, maybe Takoma Park being one of them. And there it's, you know, polling is, you know, divided, but it's 57% in favor of non-resident, you know, voting. So I think it's gained popularity there. It's gained popularity wherever there's been education or it's been implemented. You know, any resident or community engagement is really a core element and strategy for healthy neighborhoods. So it's a positive, it's a plus idea if it can work. And that's the next question: is it workable and tested? Has it worked? I mean, a lot of ideas really aren't. You know, this one really has been. There's a lot of evidence of it around the world, around this country, and in other places. You know, it's you know, there's some ideas that haven't been tested, and one we hear all the time is, well, why don't we change Tuesday voting to the weekends? And there's an idea, well, that's been tested, and that doesn't really work. Its turnout is no different, so we can sort of say we don't have to go that direction. You know, I don't want to disappoint people who want another holiday on the calendar, but, you know, holiday too is a plus or minus kind of thing on voting, so we don't really focus on that. But, you know, this is something that has has been tested. And, oh, by the way, speaking of the weekend, I just want to throw one off-topic thing, just speaking of an idea that we're testing pretty soon, and that's the idea of having your election 3 days after, after a 3-day long weekend. No, that's never been done before. And I say good luck, Dion, in managing that one on the 4th. So I think that, I think resident voting for municipal elections has been touched around the world. There are a lot of models, but obviously closer to home in Maryland, in Chicago, in New York. San Francisco's doing it with the school committee. Many others are trying to do it and planning to do it. 11 cities in Canada are working at it. Right now, this is all new for Canada, as it's new here. So they weren't interested in 10 years ago in this issue, and now they are. They're looking into it. It's controversial, and they have the same issue of having to get authority. They can pass it, but they can't implement it without higher authority. Another key question is, does it really increase representation and voter participation, provide benefits? Well, I think, it's really hard to measure. You've sort of come up a couple times, and it's very difficult to measure from election to election depending on voter participation. It does depend on contested races, depends on lots of factors. But certainly if you enfranchise an entirely new population, you're going to end up with the potential for more people to vote. So I think it passes that test, and certainly it passes the test of including more people in some direct representation. It also has a lot of benefits for the people that do it. Voting, like any civic activity, really has a lot of tangible benefits. We have a whole section on the website of Nonprofit Vote. I don't want to get into them here, but you can go there and look at all the different benefits of voting. It's voting is correlated with enhanced physical and mental health, more connection to your neighbors, more likely to engage in other civic activities. If you've been in prison, you come out and you start voting, you're less likely to go back to prison. The recidivism rate is much lower for people that end up voting once they leave prison. So there are a lot of benefits, but I want to get into the question of it's a tough issue, it's controversial. So how do you pass it? How do you even move this forward? A new idea like this, and I think I want to throw my 2 cents in. Again, not having taken an official position, and ideas that you may agree with or not. But as a believer in the idea of this policy having a good conversation, being able to be talked about in a civil way, I would say it's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, really to review as you're doing carefully the models that are out there, in the criteria that they use. I mean, not just, obviously Takoma Park is one, but there's lots of other places that, the whole residency requirement is actually very different from city to city in different countries. And a lot of the same issues exist in Australia, New Zealand, who have it, and Namibia and Morocco. I mean, you think they're different countries, but they actually encounter a lot of the same problems, and they have the same question of length of residency and all that. So it's just worth looking outside the country and within the country on that. The second thing is that I think while it has happened, and we came up earlier that historically, yes, 40 states had it up till 1926. I don't think it actually helps advance the issue to go back in history. I mean, history today seems like yesterday, or maybe but last year, but not much less 100 years ago. Now we can think about and contemplate our history, but it's really have to, like any reform, even though the right to vote has to be grounded in today's reality and what people are thinking about and what young people and citizens, new citizens, non-citizens aspire to. So I think that grounding in it today is really the best path. Obviously, you're already focused on municipalities, and that is clearly the best path on this issue, because talking about the state and federal level doesn't really make sense at this time, and there's a lot of opposition, and it's a different situation there. Some cities have tried ballot measures, and it's just talking about tactics, and this will come down the road, but I think ballot measures are tricky on this issue. It's a heated issue. There's a lot of, the issue of citizenship is contested a lot now, and so I think maybe you have to have a ballot measure. I think it's an issue which really lends itself to really robust, well-moderated public conversations in the neighborhoods, just getting people, going directly to the neighborhoods and talking about it, engaging residents, focus groups, but really, community meetings. I think that's the way to go in this issue. And finally, I want to just add one more thing is the language is quite critical, in my opinion, as it is on a lot of issues and a lot of reforms and I'm sure that proponents have considered it. But from the voting world, I think it really makes sense to really talk, really it's about resident voting of, of legal residents. So we're not, I think, getting into non-citizen terminology or even, branding as immigrant voting is you're going to raise too many questions that can't be answered quickly. But I think the idea of residency means a lot to people, and it means a lot to voting. So it's and it just expanding it to people who are here legally is a little more feasible. So I think carefully about how it's talked about in the language that's out there. I mean, obviously people will define it however they want. So they already have, apparently, according to your emails that we've heard earlier. And then finally, there's just a lot of other options for people too, besides voting, of course, is just to be engaged. Boston Election Department, I know, is always looking for translators, I'm sure. Translators is one thing, a role that anyone can play. It's just because you can't be a poll worker because you have to be a registered voter to be a poll worker, but you can be a translator. So I think and we need those in our cities across the Commonwealth. I was down at a workshop finally in one of our state partners. Someone was there talking about what can non-citizens do, or to use the term, and this one gentleman stood up and said, well, I'm not a legal citizen, but I voted 5 times in the last election. I said, well, how did you do that, sir? Well, then he said, well, basically, obviously, he helped 5 people to vote. He went out and really talked to his neighbors, talked to his family, people who were citizens, and encouraged them to help them vote. And I think that's a huge role that people who are not yet citizens can play in this democracy. And it's being involved in a campaign. You've talked about here about city government and other ways. I think being involved in politics itself is just a good experience for any young person. Obviously our democracy has, like any, a lot of room to improve, but one of the things, of course, here, it's interesting having this conversation here in Boston. We're the city back in the 1700s that when the rest of the world was monarchies or worse, we were having the conversation about democracy and the aspiration. So it's great to see this topic being talked about today, and just and thank you, Councilor Campbell and others for bringing it up.
Thank you, George, and thank you for your patience, Veronica. So Veronica Cerrado, Executive Director of Project Citizenship, so you have the floor, and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Council Chair Flaherty and Council President Campbell. Project Citizenship's mission is to overcome barriers and eliminate obstacles on the path to citizenship for permanent residents. We work to ensure that all immigrants understand and have access to the path to citizenship. We believe strongly in the inclusion and integration of all immigrants. However, I have major concerns about this legislation. The administrative and logistical hurdles in implementing the act required for full participation by non-citizens so as not to jeopardize their future eligibility to become U.S. citizens would be immense. Permanent residents seeking citizenship after holding a green card for 5 years must complete the application for naturalization, which specifically asks whether the applicant has ever registered to vote or voted in any federal, state, or local election in the United States. A yes response to either question requires a written explanation with the burden of proof falling upon the applicant to prove that she has not registered to vote or voted illegally. Failure to provide this evidence could result in the denial of citizenship, criminal prosecution, and deportation. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Mistakes are not forgiven. There is no room for error. Anyone who is wrongly registered to vote must unregister to vote before being eligible for citizenship. But someone who has wrongly voted is forever barred from becoming a U.S. citizen. Since 2014, we have assisted over 4,400 immigrants to achieve citizenship in Massachusetts. And I've personally had to tell 2 immigrants who had, in fact, voted in a federal election that they were forever ineligible to become U.S. citizens. Registering to vote now requires only a statement that one is a U.S. citizen. There's no confirmation of immigration status in Massachusetts. As of last week, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, announced that it would begin to issue a notice to appear, a document commencing removal proceedings, deportation, where there is any evidence of fraud or criminal activity by an immigrant. Illegal voting or making a false claim to U.S. citizenship would constitute such fraud or misrepresentation. Allowing non-citizens to vote in municipal elections without specific and thorough procedures would fail to protect those non-citizens from deportation proceedings. To enable non-citizens to vote while protecting them from casting an illegal ballot would require procedures to ensure that a non-citizen understands that he is only registered to vote in the municipality of Boston, procedures to ensure that she understands that she is not eligible to vote outside of Boston city limits, checking immigration status at the time of registering to vote, and perhaps at the voting booth. The act as currently written extends only to immigrants with legal status, so someone will have to make that determination. And I can tell you as an attorney, it's sometimes difficult to figure out what someone's immigration status is. So it's not an easily answered question. In short, ensuring that no non-citizen ever mistakenly be registered to vote or allowed to vote as a U.S. citizen. One option is the separate municipal election presented by Ms. Carpenter. The other option would be to have only one election and differentiate the ballot of non-citizens from U.S. citizens by making non-citizens stand in a different line with a different color ballot. Takoma Park is an excellent example. They've allowed non-citizens to vote since 1991. They have the most thorough procedures as to make sure that non-citizens don't face consequences in future immigration procedures such as naturalization. Takoma Park has different voter registration applications for U.S. citizens and non-citizens. It's important to note, as you've heard, Takoma Park has a population of 18,000. Boston has a population of 673,000. So the dimensions and enormity of the task are huge. The Takoma Park application indicates that there is no need to be a U.S. citizen, just a resident of Takoma Park. The non-citizen must explain why he is just registering to vote in Takoma Park. Photo identification and proof of residence is required to register, as you've heard. Takoma Park warns non-citizens of the consequences of voting in other districts and provides a letter of explanation to those who are undergoing the citizenship process. Second, Takoma Park maintains a system for converting voters from the non-citizen roll to the citizen roll once they have become citizens. Third, Tacoma has a voter roll registration maintenance process to ensure the quality and accuracy of voter registration rolls. They deregister non-citizens voters by sending mail that the post office will not forward, and then deregisters voters based upon that undeliverable mail. Finally, the city clerk regularly writes official letters on behalf of immigrants to prevent misunderstandings with federal authorities when requested by the immigrant. Tacoma and several other counties in Maryland, such as Hyattsville and Mount Rainier, all have similar procedures that would be very difficult to implement in Boston. As of 2017, as you heard, Tacoma has 300 non-citizens, including undocumented and documented non-citizen immigrants, of 11,000 voters. It should be 18,000, actually. Hyattsville has 33 non-citizens registered, 33. Mount Rainier has 20 non-citizens registered to vote. The Boston area alone has an estimated 48,000 legal permanent residents. Boston would be the largest municipality to grant non-citizens the ability to vote. It would be the first. Municipal voter registration would need to be separate and different. It would need to include multilingual notices and information, clear explanations to avoid confusion and where and how to register for this municipal election. Also needed would be the ability to track those who move from one town to another. A person who moves from East Boston to Chelsea or Revere, just a short commute, would not realize that she is no longer living in Boston, can no longer vote, and is of great risk and with serious repercussions if she attempted to go to register to vote. The idea of being inclusive to all Boston residents is laudable, but in my opinion, allowing thousands of non-citizens to vote does not outweigh the risk to even one non-citizen of being denied citizenship or being deported. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to address this council. I want to thank Luis Guerrero of Boston University School of Law, who's a summer intern, for doing all this legal research.
Thank you very much, Veronica, for your participation and for your comments. Any questions of this panel, Council President?
Thank you, Veronica. Jesse, are you on the phone by chance?
I am, yes.
So I think obviously Veronica is bringing up legitimate concerns, and Boston is, of course, a little bit different in that if this were to happen, the scale of it would expand dramatically compared to the counties that are currently doing this. But I'm just curious if you had any sort of thing you wanted to say or any comment based on specifics that were said about Takoma Park.
No, I mean, I thought her remarks were on point. I personally, I wouldn't begin to know how to scale this to the city of Boston. I'm sure it could be done. I'm sure it could, but it wouldn't be me. It wouldn't be me who could do it. But her points were excellent, and it is something to be cautious about for residents who take the opportunity to vote in Takoma Park. And we do try hard to make sure they know that this is the only election they can vote in.
Thank you. And just, Veronica, I'm just curious, so obviously, when looking at the city of Boston and looking at this idea of doing it here, I understand the challenges with trying to scale something like this in the city of Boston. I don't like to think that anything is sort of impossible. And we, of course, don't want to jeopardize someone's ability to become a citizen of this country with something like this. Be curious if you've had conversations with people in your network who are excited about this possibility, but explaining some of the risk and what that conversation is like for them.
Whether immigrants are motivated to apply for citizenship by the right to vote, absolutely. If you're asking if we've talked about the concept of non-citizen voting with our clients, I would have to say no.
Thank you.
In the interest of, we were saying that the risk is so great, even in instances where someone would do that, say they were going to vote and then they moved to, say, Winthrop or Revere, Chelsea, and then they got caught, I guess. Even with an attorney and an affidavit, it's irreversible. It's irreversible.
You can unregister to vote, so you can clean that up.
Yeah.
But you can never unvote. So
Okay.
you're forever barred if
Gotcha.
you vote in a local, state, or federal election where it would be illegal.
Interesting. Any other questions?
No, this was great, and I want to, do anyone have anything else to add? Or just curious if anyone from the administration has any questions?
Good. Well,
Just quickly, I would agree
I just want to be mindful of
Sorry.
time in
Yeah,
terms
right,
of
just-
public testimony, but.
No,
Go ahead,
absolutely.
George.
Just quickly to say, yeah, I agree with everything you said. It was terrific. It was really incredible statement. I do think that, just quickly, that Chicago and New York, since a lot of cities had citywide non-citizen voting. So I think that I'd be curious how those cities, the San Francisco, New York, and Chicago have done it. How they
I think it's been approved, but it's been proposed but not implemented, is my understanding.
So there are
in
other
San Francisco and
municipalities where you can vote, not necessarily at, like, certain types of local elections, so school committee and other
Right.
things like that.
Yeah.
Have you guys looked into, are there risks in those communities for folks who are voting in school committee elections or other elections?
There
Is it
shouldn't
even
be any risk around school committees because
Or-
that's not a government body. If it's around, if it's a school district and you're voting about something at a school, as opposed to electing a school council, so it depends on what the vote is for.
No, for
Council
Right,
members.
so
Then as long as it's allowed, it wouldn't be
in
illegal.
the elected school committee as well, they're allowed to weigh in.
If it's allowed, it wouldn't be illegal, but then you need to have documentation and proof
Right.
that you voted legitimately and under what.
Do you know if
guidance.
those communities have had folks, I mean, obviously there are risks there as well of folks voting and jeopardizing their ability to become citizens or their application process. Have they, in these other municipalities, which of course are a lot larger than the ones in Maryland, how have they responded?
I don't know of any examples of deportation based upon voting or denaturalization based upon voting. Those aren't readily available. It would be in the media, and we didn't find any.
Okay. And we can do some outreach as well. I think those are obviously more comparable in terms of scale. But I do think the conversation is definitely worth having. And I want to thank everyone, because the goal was to have various perspectives, talk about the risks, but also not just talking about the voting piece, but talk about other things that we could be doing that we aren't necessarily doing, or that we did at one point in the past and stopped for some reason. So we have a long list, and this will be ongoing in terms of what we can actually check off the box. But in terms of the voting piece, I think it's definitely worth continuing the conversation. But I appreciate the various perspectives that were presented today, and also the various perspectives that we received via emails and calls. And some were, I mean, I don't know about Councilor Janey, all the responses I got were not all negative. Frankly, there were folks who even pointed to other countries. I had a lot of folks send links to Ireland's website about their non-citizens or who are allowed to vote in their local elections, and only local elections there. So I learned a great deal through this process. So thank you guys, and thank your team for the research. Thank you.
So that will conclude panel 2. Thank you to Jeff. Thank you to Jesse, who's joining us by phone.
Jesse.
George, Caroline, and obviously Veronica as well. So now we're moving into the public testimony phase. Anyone wishing to offer public testimony needs to sign in the sign-in sheet. And we have 2 podiums to my left and right. So Carl Becker, David Kane, I'm going to try Lena Darte, Kanan Thiragadhanam, Tony Marino, looks like Tonai Taylor, and looks like Lidi Quincino. So just see these podiums up here, and we can alternate. We can go left to right, left to right, left to right. So Carl Becker, where is Carl?
Yeah,
You're
right
Carl,
here.
you're first in line, pal. So please introduce yourself, any affiliation that you have, and then you have the record. Just ask you to be mindful that we have probably 20 people offering public testimony. We do have a hard stop at 5:30, so if you could be as 2 to 3 minutes, if that works for you, it works for me.
One page, yeah.
Perfect.
We'll go in the order
All right.
that the names were called.
Yep, and so Carl's going to go first, David Kane's going to go second, Lena Duarte is going to go third, Kanan Thiragadam is going to go fourth, Tony Marino fifth, Tonai Taylor sixth, Lidi Quincino. If I'm saying it right, please correct me if I'm wrong. Go ahead, Carl.
All right. Thank you. My name is Carl Becker. I'm a resident of Dorchester. Thank you to everyone here today for a chance to talk positively and constructively about increased civic engagement, especially among immigrants. Boston is where the fight against taxation without representation began, way back in 1773. My wife has lived in the U.S. for over 10 years and is currently experiencing a flavor of taxation without representation. However, she knew this when she signed up to immigrate to the U.S. She is not angry like the Tea Partiers of 1773 were. She's not asking for this voting measure to change or anything like that, but she's certainly not opposed to the idea. However, I, her husband, and a U.S. citizen, born and raised here in the U.S., am in support of expanding voting to people who are permanent residents of the USA. It's right there in the name, permanent resident. They're sticking around. The amount of legal hoops and the extensive permanent residency process to jump through to become a permanent resident means only people who are truly interested in becoming invested in the community are going to stick around with it. The time, money, and paperwork are non-trivial, and I should know I've been part of that firsthand. But more important than the paperwork or money is the time spent living in the community. My wife and I call Boston home. After years of saving, we even recently were able to buy a condo. We care about the community. We go to community events. We shop in the community. We go to Flans for soccer matches and trivia nights. We have our favorite oyster joint and so on. We read the local news, talk with coworkers, friends, and family who are both U.S. citizens and permanent residents. We have hopes and dreams that are pretty common with everyone else in the city and in the country: liberty, pursuit of happiness, and we are part of the Boston community. Someone said that Americans are born around the world every day. Some just haven't come home yet. That homecoming can take a long time, though, to becoming a U.S. citizen. It takes many years. If the U.S. government has allowed someone to carry a card that says permanent resident, someone who works, pays taxes, and engages in their community just like their U.S. citizen neighbor, wouldn't it be American to allow that permanent resident a little more voice in their community's direction? I think it would be a great step forward to allow someone who has been here in Boston for many years and who is a permanent resident to be able to vote just like U.S. citizens in their community. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate your time. David Kane, welcome, David. Please state your name and affiliation for the record. You have the floor.
Mr. Council President, Councilor Campbell, thank you. The value of something is related to the value, to what people have to spend in order to obtain it. Diplomas from Harvard and MIT are valuable because people have to work harder to obtain those diplomas than diplomas from other colleges. Do you want the students if students spend more time studying the books and less time going to parties, then their education is more valuable, and they will be able to profit from it in their careers. The respect, professionals should earn the respect of the public, and immigrants should earn their citizenship by studying hard for them, studying the Constitution, studying our laws, studying our history. If people don't know that the Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court have political power, then they won't. If immigrants don't realize that the Congress and the Supreme Court have political power, they'll think that the president is a dictator. They'll have the mistaken impression that the president is a dictator, and they won't care who the president nominates to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court, and they won't care whether the Democrat Party can become a majority in the U.S. House of Representatives after the November election. Naturalized citizens have an obligation to learn about our country in order to participate in the benefits of being citizens. If you don't want Russians meddling in our elections, don't let them vote. Make them become U.S. citizens before they can participate by voting. Make every other group of immigrants learn about our history, our Constitution, our laws, the structure and form of our government. Make all these immigrants work hard to acquire and earn U.S. citizenship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Is it Lena, did I say it correct? Lena Darte? Welcome, and please state your name and affiliation for the record, and you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lena Darte, and I'm here to talk about why I would like to vote in local elections. I've been here for about 10 years, and like most legal residents, I have been fighting very hard to become an American citizen. But the pathway or the roadway to it is extremely long and expensive, and it's kind of a pain. The right to vote is a privilege, and it's a right that a lot of people take for granted, and it's not a right that I would take for granted at all. Democracy requires work, it requires participation, it requires compromise, and I think that the ability to vote, even at the most local elections, would grant me the ability to have a voice. I go to community meetings, I chase my friends around and remind them to sign up for voting. I talk to random people on the street about gerrymandering, but that doesn't give me a voice. I can influence people to vote, and people can vote for whoever they want. They should be educated voters, but I don't have a voice. I pay taxes, I own property, and I think that at the end of the day, that should give me a certain level of ability to have a voice and help dictate what direction Boston moves in the future. I don't plan on leaving. As much as the US government is trying to throw me out, I'm gonna stay here forever. And I think that it's also important to point out that giving me the ability to vote is not going to dissuade me from becoming a citizen. I wanna become a citizen. I wanna go to jury duty, which is something that almost no one says, but I want that ability. Being able to vote in local elections just gives me a taste of what I can have, and it's just going to motivate me more to want to become a citizen. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Lena. Kanan, welcome back. How you doing?
Good.
Good to see you.
How are you?
Please state your name and affiliation for the record.
My name is Kanan Thiruvengadam. Thank you, Councillor Flaherty, and thank you, Councillor Campbell, for
If
creating.
you could just speak a little clearly into the microphone, that'd be great.
Okay. Thank you both for creating this space to have this conversation. Just based on what we heard from Lena there, I'm thinking when people earn the citizenship by working hard for it, they're going to value it even more than by just being born within certain boundaries. So that in itself gives me a great hope that everybody who gets the ability to vote, earns the citizenship, is going to value both of those. And if people are given the opportunity to vote, they will vote. And this applies particularly to immigrants because it is appreciated so much more. Anyway, but in terms of voting, what I see some of my fellow citizens and my own neighbors doing is, do you really have to vote? Can you not just tag your counselor on Facebook or tweet at them and hope that they would appear and fix your problem? When you can do that, why vote? It's so simple. This is the level of engagement that we have, some citizens, to have that level of entitlement and expectation. But in any case, taxation without representation is injustice. That's the problem. The term has been used so often, it's become a cliche, but people don't understand that it is injustice. Immigrants pay taxes, legal residents pay taxes, and it's enough if you have a tax ID for you to pay tax. You don't even have to have a social security number. So when you are paying for your life and you're being here and you're affected by all the decisions made by the government, but you don't have a say in it, that is injustice. And we just should not stand for such injustice, I think. So I want to make one very quick point about why this lack of representation leads to problems that many people may not realize. It's simply like if you had two children, and if you told one child, you could come to me if you have a problem, and if you told the other child, you can't come to me if you have a problem. Think about what differential you're creating between the two. And one of them cannot complain. So this is the situation people are in. You may have an H-1B visa, you're at your employer, and you have to wait until you earn their trust so they can sponsor your green card. And once the green card is sponsored, it may take 5 years, 6 years, 10 years for you to get the green card. And then you have the green card for another 5 years before you can apply for citizenship. So that could be a 20-year period of the prime of your life that you're giving to improve the economy of this country. And during that 20-year period, you don't have a say. That should not be acceptable. Also, in general, I think that we as a country may be languishing in status quo. Change is so difficult. By getting fresh blood, fresh pairs of eyes, people who want to act, people who want to vote, I think we would make change possible and make it possible for us to solve problems that require us to change quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanan. Tony Marino, is there a Tony Marino here? And a Tonai Taylor. Lidi Quincino. Musa Mousawi. Where's Musa Mousawi? Hi, Musa, how are you?
How you doing?
If that's convenient for you, feel free to bring that down. Yep, you have it.
Yep.
If you could just introduce yourself, your name and affiliation for the record, you have the floor, sir.
Right. My name is Musa Mousawi. Can you all hear me?
Welcome.
Everybody hears me? Okay.
Yes.
My name is Musa Mousawi. My affiliation is I'm just a permanent resident here in Boston. So I was born in Baghdad, Iraq. Up until the age of 12, I was living under Saddam Hussein. And then I moved to Jordan, where I was a resident. I only say that to point out the fact that in those countries I couldn't vote, neither could my family. And if they could vote, they probably would have voted for ramps in my school. They probably could have voted for laboratories that I had access to. When I arrived to this country, I've seen those ramps, and I've had access to those things. Over the last 8 years, I've seen what development has happened in Boston. I've seen structures of glass and buildings and steel that were not here before when I first arrived. And as I look into the city, I'm thinking to myself, well, over the last 80 years, what could I do? I still can afford to live in this city, but I know a lot of people in their communities who've been priced out of their communities and can no longer live in the city. over those 8 years, I've had a finance degree from University of Massachusetts Boston and a law degree from Boston College. So to address earlier points, con law was not my favorite topic, but I'm pretty sure I know a lot about that. So to point out, to talk about privilege, as a person with disability who made it out of Iraq, I understand the idea of privilege. I understand the fact that I made it out of a place and I'm privileged to make it out. So I understand how voting could be a privilege. And I understand that if I am in this city and that most of the politics that dictates how I live is local. So I know that I will treat my vote respectfully, and so will others. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Musa. Anyone else here wishing to offer public testimony may do so now or forever hold your peace. Seeing and hearing no desire for additional testimony, I want to take the opportunity to thank the administration, folks here, Alejandro and Dion, for sticking around, as well as the chief, who I know who just stepped out. But it's important that we give everyone, the other panels, as well as the members of the public, an opportunity to have your ear as you take this message back to His Honor the Mayor. So we really appreciate the time and attention that you put into this hearing, and for those other panel members, our colleagues as well. So any final thoughts from Council President, lead sponsor, before we adjourn?
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty, and thank you to the administration and the panelists who had to run, but also folks who came to participate and also offer testimony, particularly those who may not have permanent residency yet or citizenship yet, but are on the pathway. Coming forward to testify in a public space is not always easy, so thank you. Thank you to my colleagues as well. I want to just say I think this is a great example of how you can have a conversation about things that people deem controversial and do it in a respectful way, even if at the end of the day we disagree. And thank you to my team, particularly my chief of staff, who put a lot of work into this and did a lot of outreach to set this up. And Jesse also for joining us via conference call. And Kerry, thank you for setting this up and making it so seamless. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Council President, and that will conclude today's hearing on docket 0240, hearing to explore voting rights for immigrants with legal status and other inclusive practices. The Committee on Government Operations is adjourned. Thank you.